Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of the Future Tech podcast series. It's me, Charlie Sell, the Group MD for Arrows Group, where I interview CTOs, thought leaders, technical leaders, asking them a bit about their story, thoughts on emerging technology, what excites them about either personally or their business, and that all-important career advice to our STEM graduate listeners. So I'm really pleased to have Steve Beard on the show today. Steve is a CTO for Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I presume most people out there know Mr. and Mrs. Smith. They've really risen to fame over the last, I'd say 5 to 10 years, but Steve will probably tell us the true length. And for those who don't know them, it's a travel club for hotel lovers. That's the aim. And as I say, I know I've used them a lot over the years, and the places and the recommendations truly are quite niche and unique. So I imagine there's a lot of tech that goes behind that to be able to stand out from the crowd. So Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Charlie. Nice to be here.
Yeah, and we were saying actually, for those who are watching, although the vast majority of our listeners are listening on Spotify, the painting in the background is one that your daughter did, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Actually, I forgot this was actually going to go out as visual as well as audio. So yes, that's a self-portrait by my daughter when she was at school.
Yeah. Well, I think it's amazing. It's you've got a very talented family there. So let's jump straight into your story and a bit about how you got into technology and a bit of your career.
Yeah, sure. I guess the start point is the leaving university. So I've not got a computer science background at university. I'm actually a mechanical engineer, is my Bachelor of Science. But in my final year, I got into control engineering, which is sort of, for people who don't know, it's basically taking inputs from things like sensors and turning them into movement for things like robotics or torpedoes, or now things like autonomous vehicles. So interesting area of technology, and it got me into computing. And my first role was actually sort of a blend of engineering and computing, which is for a company called British Maritime Technology. What they sort of worked in, I suppose they used a lot of sort of EU and European grants at the time to research things to do with either, I did some stuff on why bridges fall down and how you maintain them, and things like that. So it's quite an interesting one, but it got me into the computing side of things, and it really threw me in the deep end. So I was talking to people around Europe who were very senior, and there was me, this young little grad just coming out, trying to keep up with what was going on, and trying to keep my head above water, so to speak. So it was a real, a starting point in at the deep end, very much so. British Maritime Technology, we had big, big tanks to do testing in as well. So that's the start. But because I started getting into computing more, I thought I wanted to go that way rather than the engineering point, and that took me to a company called Savoy, who, again, it's sort of engineering. So it's part of Travers Morgan at the time, which was a big group about doing civil engineering. But we were the support team, so I did all the sysadmin. That was sort of what I was getting into at the time: system administration of Unix machines, Solaris as it was at the time. But I also got a chance to code more, and that was really my starting as a coding point. For those who are listening, they're still around. C was the language of choice at the time, getting into C++ as well. So that's kind of where I cut my teeth on code. I moved through from there to CACI. So CACI is still around. They're kind of in the marketing space, specifically around demographics and things like that, and big databases. And I got a chance to go in there and write code initially, writing code for their on the database. I learned SQL. But it was an opportunity really to start my leadership, and that was interesting for me because the guy around the team left, and as many people who are in my position do, I just started doing the job. I wasn't given the role, but someone had to lead the team, and someone had to organize the work and talk to people, and it was kind of, I just started doing it naturally. It was my first chance really to realize that I quite liked the people side of technology as well, the developing people and learning people and things like that. So it was that was good for that point of view, and it was also sort of interesting code as well. You're working with big volumes of data, and the first chance really to get into how large quantities of data and performance was an important part of computing, and how you write code that runs really well. So yeah, that was CACI. And my career kind of takes a number of sort of flip-flops backwards and forwards now. Whether I decide whether I want to be technical or whether I want to be a manager. And I think for people listening, often with careers, they don't go in a nice, neat, clean trajectory. They wobble about and you choose to do something and go one way and it doesn't work. So you go back to something you did before. So P&L Nedlow was going away from that team leadership and back towards, I was a technical manager as it was called. So I looked after lots of teams, not in terms of them as people, but which technologies they should use, how things should be architected, stuff like that. So it's quite interesting from the point of view of the technology. But I learned a couple of things at P&L Nedlow that sort of stood me through my career. Number one, I don't like big companies. So big companies don't suit me. I like doing things informally. I like face-to-face. I like talking to people. And big companies tend to have lots of processes, lots of channels you have to go through, lots of tape you have to cut. So I realized I didn't like that. And I also realized that I'd missed the team leadership side. So hence the flip back now to leading a team. And it took me really into the first company where I started to deal with, I suppose, customers directly, which is interesting as well. So Sporting Index, I don't know, people may or may not know Sporting Index out there. It's interesting. It's what's called a spread betting company in sports. So it took a financial idea, which is how dealing with spreads and buying and selling, and turned it into sports and use sports to set the markets. But now I was really dealing with high volumes of changes. We were doing like millions of price changes, in a minute. And to deal with that and get things out to a website was a really interesting technical challenge. And at the same time, I got the chance to lead a team. So I was leading the team. So really enjoyed that. It's a great company to work for. It was really hard in terms of high pressure, but it was also really rewarding. They were very much for anyone who gets the chance to work in a trading organization, being a financial trading organization, or this, which is a sports trading, they really play and work hard. They do work incredibly hard, but when they play hard too, and they really let go. It's probably not so PC now because it was definitely a very male-dominant sports, drinking, hard work type company. So I've been interested to see how it's changed since I was there, because it was quite a long time ago. But yeah, so and then while I was there quite a long time. I was there 7 years. I went from leading the team to being the architect. Again, so I flipped back into technology under one of the CTOs, under the CTO there. And then a new CTO came in and didn't want me as the architect anymore. So I decided that, it was decided I was no longer needed. I was made redundant. So I guess another bit of part of the story here, and I'll mention it now, is I have been made redundant 3 times. Once of my own choosing, twice not. But when that happens, it often works out really well. And I think for anyone who's working through their career, you're often going to find times where it's not your choice to leave. It's not a bad thing. Things will always turn out well. Or there'll be another story. You tell yourself, I've done this before, although it feels bad at the time. I think it actually is a really, it's a good way of learning. You turn a bad thing into a good thing. It's good for your growth. And I got a chance to go to Rock. So Rock was completely different from everything else I've ever worked for. And I went there purely on the strength of the CTO at the time. And she had this vision that Rock, which was a construction company, and most construction companies don't really use technology that much. They're sort of there for planning and spreadsheets and stuff like that. She thought that a company like Rock could use technology in a different way and really use it as an advantage, as a USP. And I was really interested in that, and how I was bringing Agile at the time, which I'd learned at Sporting Index as well, into a very non-Agile company. So I went there to try and use technology in a different way. And we did it things like, a lot of people use it now, but route planning for our engineers to make sure they were taking the most efficient route between the various jobs they had to do, and working out what they had to pick up at various points. We had technology to do that. And it was things like that where we were trying to push Rock, and it was working really. Unfortunately, Rock went with the credit crunch and went out of business, went into administration. So that was another time when I was leaving, not of my own choice. It sort of happens a fair bit. think, in my career. But I got to Trainline, and that was really fortunate. Strangely enough, I'd actually interviewed with Trainline when I went to the rock role, but timing didn't quite work out. I never got the second interview. And I re-interviewed, and the guy remembered me and got the role this time because we really liked each other the first time round. And Trainline's a brilliant organization. For anyone who gets a chance, if you're an engineer and you want to work for a good engineering company that does agile well and does technology well, Trainline is excellent. I learned loads there from, I was a development manager there. I learned from ThoughtWorks, who we were working with, another great company. And I just learned how agile should work. I learned how to build proper systems, how to test first, which nobody was doing. This is how long ago it was. There was no test first type stuff until I got to Trainline, and suddenly we were talking test first, and we were doing continuous delivery, and we were doing releases more frequently. And it was all the things that now everyone talks about. But when I got there, it was kind of new, at least in the UK, I think. And that was brilliant. I learned loads, and I even got a chance. So the second half of my career at Trainline International, we were trying to work out whether Trainline could go and sell tickets in Europe to begin with. And what we decided to do was take, I think it was to start with, there were only 4 of us, to take 4 people out of the team and build a startup company within Trainline. It was completely autonomous. It worked in different ways. It got funding from Trainline, but it basically didn't use any of the engineering systems. And we built from scratch. We went absolutely as lean as we could. We followed the lean startup methodology, Eric Ries's lean startup methodology, people know that. I just learned, and we just did so well. We moved so fast. We were doing, I think we worked out in about 3 months, we did 186 releases. We were releasing like multiple times a day. To the point with which the engineers said you were getting to the point where you were complaining if a release was taking like more than 10 minutes and it was slow and we had to refactor it so it was quick. And it's that level of engineering excellence that then spread out into Trainline, and they learned from us and we learned from them. So a really cool company to work for. Unfortunately, they folded, well, they didn't fold TLI. They decided TLI had proved its purpose and sort of merged it back into the team. And that was the time I thought, this is time for me to move on and try and do the next thing. And then I got on another amazing company, which is Moonpig. That's probably, in terms of culture, I think it's probably the most enjoyable company in the world. Because it was like the brand. It really was like the brand. It was just fun and a bit cheeky, and people were like that. We were very irreverent. It was all you were able to try lots of things because it was just the way we had hackathons and things like that. I learned. I took what I'd learned at Trainline and helped Moonpig, because Moonpig, while it was fun with culture and was agile, wasn't at the level the Trainline was at. So I could bring ideas in from there. And I went in as the head of development. But I was effectively the CTO of Moonpig, because Moonpig was part of Photobox Group. Yeah. So it was a big group, again, another too big company. But we could stick on our own and be autonomous and do things in our own way. So that was great, really good. I learned about product a lot more then. I got much more involved with the product side as well. So product and tech absolutely goes hand in hand. But Trainline, it was a little bit more separate. Moonpig, we were able to bring it really together. And make a really cool company in terms of moving super fast again, trying things. We were really imaginative and creative in terms of what we could try. And building a team again. And unfortunately, Moonpig, I lost that role because the company changed. So they sold. And there was a change at the top, and the culture just shifted, and it became less of a try things and do things. It was more of a, if something didn't work, you would sort of, rather than learn from it, it was more that went wrong and that's bad, go and do it properly, sort of thing. Which I don't like. I think much more failure is a great way of learning. And I think people like Spotify say they fail faster than everybody else. That's right, fail fast, learn, move on. Try again. There's no blame. It's a good thing. You learn a lot more from fail than you do from succeed. So I moved out of there and I took my first CTO role at Swoon. And Swoon is a really interesting company in terms of what it does. People who don't know, it's quite small. It's basically an online furniture retailer. But their specialty and what they did was, if you go to say, I don't know, any of the big furniture companies, they'll tend to have two design cycles a year. So they had 2 collections. Swoon had a new product, or in fact, multiple new products every month. We've had 10 or 12 new products every month and continuously improve. So it was that agile, move fast, learn, fail and learn. Really nice cycle, but it didn't work for me because it sort of goes back to that tech, not tech. It wasn't tech enough. It was not a tech enough company. It was a lot of it was tech. It was more about the design.
Yeah.
As a CTO, it was the first time I'd really got in at the CTO level, and it was tough. I really struggled with it on a personal level. It was just, I was doing too much strategy and C, and not enough technology and delivery. So I decided to leave there. I got on really well with the CEO, and he was great, and we sort of talked it through. And then I got to Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which is an interesting story in itself, because I was looking at the time not to be a CTO. I thought, I like engineering, I like being head of development. Let's go find a bigger organization where I can do what I did at Trainline, effectively. And I got a direct message from Tamara Lawn, who's was at the time the CTO, is now the CEO of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And she said, come along, I want to interview. And I went, not looking for a CTO role, sorry, thanks, thank you for the offer, great, but not that. And she just she didn't give up. She came back. And she asked again, and eventually I got to the point, I thought, okay, I'll come in and talk to you. It's not going to go anywhere, but I'll come in and talk to you. I suppose it's a great lesson for anybody in sort of tenacity. And if you believe in something, just keep going at it. And she did, and she's like that. She just drives through things and she makes it go with the way she wants. So I went in and I found a company that, not what I thought, but which is really tech driven and tech enabled. Mr. and Mrs. Smith is what it is, it's you said it's the travel club for hotel lovers, but it's more than just it's not a travel agent. It's a club, it's a membership, and we treat not only our members, say the people who come and look at us, but our hoteliers are part of that club. And our partners, we work with big partners like BA and IHG. They're part of the club, and it's this feeling of we add value to the hotel. We find you the most amazing places to go. And we'll support you and keep you going through that. And we're there for you if you need us. And during the pandemic, we gave everybody refunds that wanted it. We didn't, push back and say, no, it's not in the T's and C's. We gave it. It's that kind of club. And the reason you can do that is because we're connected really well within the technology. So we're connected at the back end in all sorts of ways, through channel managers and directly into hotels. And then that gets me back to the technical challenge. We're dealing with millions of price updates and price changes on an hourly basis. And that's a great technical challenge. I love those sorts of technical challenges where how do you do that? How do you do that and make sure that it gets out to the website immediately as soon as it can get in and gets out to BA's systems so they can book it? And the complexity of all this is really interesting. So I found that, and I met a really good team and a really good culture, very similar to, different but similar to Moonpig in the fact that it's a culture where there's a lot of irreverence. The whole Mr. and Mrs. Smith thing, the dirty weekend sort of scenario, it is what it's like. It's built about that. It's a little bit edgy, a little bit non-PC, but it's great, and the people love working in this sort of culture. Yeah. So yeah, I got the chance to come in, and I've been there now for 2 years. We've ridden out the pandemic really well. Despite being in travel, we still got cash in the bank. We haven't had to take on money, and people have just worked really hard because that's what they do here. They work. It's interesting. We sort of had a lot about it. There's no pressure to work hard, not from the top. Pressure comes from each individual who really want to work, and they want to not let the team down. It's a great feeling. I mean, it can be stressful at times. But, it's really good. And so yes, here I am now.
Yeah, fantastic. And thank you for that, because what I really loved about that is, as you say, there's a love for both technology and management, a love for, and too much C in the CTO. And the story of what you've learned at Trainline and the upskilling or the learning curve there, that you're then able to help with other great brands like Moonpig and then as you say, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And I love the fact that you're able to talk about, and it's so true that if when one door closes, another opens, and whether that's a redundancy, whether it's a moving abroad, for whatever reason, change isn't a bad thing if you embrace the outcome, is it?
No, it's definitely not. And change is something that happens all the time.
Yeah.
And that was interesting. We had yesterday. We happened to have an offsite, and we had a guy who was working with us from a company called Agility about agile, and he talked about the difference between sort of being resilient, which is dealing with change, but not expecting to go back to what you were once you've gone through the change.
Yeah.
Expecting to adapt and be different out the other side, but being resilient enough to deal with that. And so that's an agile thing, but it's also a life thing, I think.
Yeah.
You know, you're made more by what you do when the things go wrong is more defines what you are than what happens when things go right.
Yeah, and again, I think that's brilliant, because that is such a good concept or a theory on it to look forward. And you know, would you believe that we've flown through this podcast, so we're going to jump straight into thinking about, because we've talked a lot actually about agile, or you've talked a lot about agile, and I guess that's probably the thing. It seems to me, without putting words in your mouth, a way of working is probably what excites you most around technology, or getting people without feeling like they have to work, and how a methodology and how a process can support that.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I think I get most passionate about agile, and about implementing agile within a team, and within an organization. Actually, there's a big difference. A lot of organizations, and even Trainline was guilty of this, are really agile within the tech team or the tech and product teams, less agile outside.
Yeah.
When you get into the marketing teams or you get into the sales teams, they're not agile. And one of the nice things we're doing at the moment is trying to spread agile from the tech teams outwards.
Yeah.
So that the whole organization becomes agile.
Yeah.
And it's just an amazingly good way of working. It does so many good things in terms of you don't get stuck with a horrible long plan you're having to stick to, or you don't get unrealistic deadlines that you can't meet. You're working on a much shorter time frame. And it allows you to change, and it allows you to adapt, it allows you to get feedback from what's going on. So I'm very much an advocate of agile, and agile, not Scrum. So I don't conform to a single agile sort of methodology. I think you take bits from whatever is out there. Scrum's got some great ideas, but it's very fixed around what it does. Lean and Kanban have some great ideas, and you can bring the tools from each of those into your teams, and sometimes they work. The other thing I found, things that worked at Trainline didn't work at me.
Yeah.
The things that hadn't worked at Trainline did work at me.
Yeah.
And so it's always try and don't worry when it fails, because you try the next thing.
Yeah, brilliant. And again, there's so many nice takeaways out of this. So let's jump straight into the career advice. So for our listeners, thinking about you guys, you're going through your own growth journey again as well. And so when you're interviewing people and looking, what one or two bits of advice can you give our graduate listeners that will help them stand out, or best chance of getting a job?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So a couple of things. Remember, whenever you're going into an interview, I think to remember it's a conversation. It's a two-way thing. So you're there, and remember that you're there effectively trying to present yourself as best you can, and kind of maybe don't think of it like this, but it's almost like selling yourself.
Yeah.
Don't go too American on that, especially in the UK, but it does work. But the other side, the person who's interviewing you should be trying to sell the company to you and show you what's good about the company. And it's where those two things meet. So you're looking for the meeting of the person and the company, where the things come together. And so when you're starting out, you don't have, the problem's always you don't have the experience. You don't have a long list of things you've done, jobs you've done, technology you've done. So it's about showing what is important to you, what you're passionate about, what you care about. And if there's enough of those that fit, a good employer will look at that and see the potential for it to fit, because you're never going to be the finished article, but you never are, but especially when you start. So it's more, they're looking for, what is it about you that means you can come into the company and you'll work with the team and you'll learn from the team, and your energy for whatever it is, whatever your passion is, whatever you care about, make that sort of forefront of what you're doing. Yeah. It's the same when you said, I know I've had it before. When I talk about agile, I get passionate about it.
Yeah.
And if you're talking in that way about something to an interviewer, and it's hard, I know, but try and be yourself and be passionate about things. They'll like that. They won't dislike the fact that you get passionate about things.
Yeah. Steve, that is such good advice. And then, you know what, you're right. Again, for anyone, well, actually, even our listeners who are listening can tell even in your voice when you start talking about agile, the passion comes through. So it's not even about physical cues. It's literally about just how you spark up. And anyone entering a career in technology, that should be something, work should be a passion or fun, or you should be looking for what you can take from it that brings the best out of you. And I think you've just articulated that really, really well. So can you believe it? That's a show has flown by today. But how interesting, and thank you, because as I say, your story, both the humility of your own career, but actually what we focus on with Agile and the career advice to graduates about it's a two-way conversation, it's a two-way meeting, and so without getting too American or overselling yourselves, exactly, it is about having a chance to have the company present to you as much as you to them, and I suppose it's to have that inner confidence, isn't it, to go there and be the best you can be.
It is, yeah, definitely, and that is hard, I know, and I remember back to when I was starting, you're not even thinking like that, you just desperately want to get that first step on the ladder. But always remember that companies are looking and struggling to find good people too.
Yeah.
They're just as desperate to fill the role as you are to get in there if it's the right fit.
Yeah.
So try and bear that in mind.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you, Steve. So this is another show coming up. I hope you found it okay, and didn't mind talking about your story.
No, not too much. I probably went on too long, didn't I, in many ways?
It was really, as I say, what I love about these shows is each one is different. And when you've got brands like yours, and actually, the other bit, I was scribbling down notes, but a lot of our listeners are STEM graduates, so studying mechanical engineering or even science, chemistry. The lovely thing about technology is you don't have to study a computer science degree to get into it. There is so many transferable skills, and that's probably my personal quest, is to open the eyes to the next generation that anyone can enter this industry, and it has so many advantages. It really is an industry that's evolving almost by the day. I remember you mentioned about C, and I remember when I first started in the recruitment side, and I was having to try and find people with C++, and then C# and .NET, and now it's a different engineering language on a weekly basis. It's
absolutely, yeah. Yes, well, very much that.
Very much. So to all our listeners, that's another episode of our Future Tech podcast series. As hopefully you know by now, the podcast landing page, arrowspodcast.com, is embedded into the 17 universities we're partnered with, but also on our Spotify channel, as well as on our own landing page. So one more time, a massive thank you to Steve.
Thanks, Charlie. It's been great being on.
And to all our listeners, here's another episode of Future Tech.
Thank you for listening to Future Tech with Charlie Sell, a podcast from Arrows Group Global. Please subscribe to this podcast so that you never miss an episode. Arrows Group is a global technology recruitment and workforce solutions provider who focus on people at the heart of all our interactions. With in-depth technology expertise and global candidate communities, we offer bespoke solutions to every client and candidate. To find out more, visit arrowsgroup.com.